Let's go back to 1982. A band called Asia came out with, In the Heat of the Moment, Only Time Will Tell, and it was made up of Steve Howe, John Wetton, Carl Palmer, and a fourth guy that I can't remember right now. Jeff Downs. And I had no idea about the whole UK, King Crimson, yes, intermingling, incestuous band switching. I never knew this was a supergroup. I never knew who all these people were, ELP and all that stuff. Because I was just getting into it, and it wasn't progressive rock. It was kind of poppy. It was, it was light pop. And but as I started researching stuff, I found out where all these guys were from and their pedigrees and what they had done, and then I started listening to Yes and King Crimson and these bands that from the 70s that I'd never heard of, and yet when I bought the albums or got them from the library or whatever, I'd be like, oh yeah, that song is by Yes? Oh, I've heard that song. That was a really cool song. And, Bill Bruford would be playing some jazzy, offbeat, crazy time signature thing, like, something like that, It's like, wow, what a breath of fresh air that is. So, I started collecting Yes albums, and I love John Anderson's voice. And I love Bill Bruford's drumming, and then I went to see Yes on the Big Generator tour. Unfortunately, he'd been replaced by Alan by that time, but Alan White. But he's good too. He's not Bill Bruford, but he's got some fair chops of his own. And of course, Trevor Rabin had stepped in, and by that time, and luckily I got to see a great version of Yes on the Union tour. I think it was 1987 or 88, when they had everybody, like 9 or 10 members. They had 2 drummers, Bruford and White. They had Rabin and the original guitarist, Steve Howe, obviously. And they had Rick Wakeman and the tall, bald dude, Tony Levin, and Chris Squire on bass. So it was just, remarkable to actually see that so many years later, because I was just completely oblivious to it when I was 9 years old. But then seeing it all, so many years later as a mature person was a real treat for me to see it was like going back in time, really. So, let's go on with 1982. In the early 80s, a band came on the scene called the Police. Actually, they came on the scene in the late 70s, but I never heard of them until, Roxanne became a hit here. And when Zenyatta Bandada came out, I believe it was in 82 or 83, I was just, wow, this guy is some crazy kind of drummer. And Sting was great, and Andy Summers was great, and it was like, another great trio. But they're playing some crazy reggae thing with an English thing mixed in with some Middle Eastern, and it's just like, whoa, great mix. And unfortunately, Sting and Stewart both have egos the size of Tasmania, but they had a good 4 or 5 albums, and I've got all those, and I'm just a huge Police fan, except for maybe Synchronicity, half of that. So Stuart Copeland was definitely one of those, was like, what's he doing there? How the hell is he playing that hi-hat pattern? from Message in the Bottle and still hitting the snare and the ride at the same time. You know, like how close are his drums? How are they set up? You know, and there's pictures of him sitting there with his feet up and fuck shit on his written, and he claimed that he needed to write swear words on his drums so that he could get his anger at Sting out, and you know, get the appropriate motivation to smack his drums as hard as he possibly could. But anyway, just things like that stick in my memory, and he was certainly a huge influence on me, as was Sting in his solo records. He's got a lot of really good songs on there. He's a great songwriter. I remember a quote from Stewart. One day he said, I think it was in Modern Drummer, they were asking him about writing songs, and he said, well, Andy and I and Sting all wrote about the same amount of songs, but Sting wrote all the good ones, or all the famous ones. So that was pretty funny. And then, of course, Stuart Copeland went on to become a very famous and prolific score writer for movies. He never played the drums for like 20 years until very recently. He started playing with a couple of bands, and he's back into it, and he plays for the love of it now rather than in a band with all kinds of strife and things like that. So I guess he's a happy guy again. And he's another intelligent drummer. You know, drummers, there's a million drummer jokes, but of all the drummers that I know personally and who I've seen in interviews, most of us are pretty contemplative and philosophical and smart. It takes a little bit of figuring out how to do things, and especially with the more complicated the music gets. Yeah, you have your Tommy Lee and you know, a million other guys like him who probably inspire most of the drummer jokes. But most drummers, I would say, are pretty in touch with the world. So at the same time that all this great new music was coming in the 80s, early 80s, 82, my grade 10, this Euro trash was just infiltrating the radio. You know, Tainted Love and Bananarama and just, I don't even know if Bananarama was from Europe, but they were, you know, that kind of music. And MTV and Mush Music were taken off, and it was all videos of people with crazy hair, flock of seagulls, all that stuff. So this was kind of good for me because it made me disenfranchised with the whole music, the whole new music, and I started doing my homework. I started going to the library and getting all these old albums, and I found Triumph and Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and the Stones and all these bands, The Who, Deep Purple, you know, just all the 70s bands, the 60s bands, the Kinks, The Who. And I started doing my homework, you know, retroactively, and learning all these songs, and I was like, wow, there's so much great music, but not now. And so it was, and then I thought, gee, I wonder what Rush is doing. And in '84, when Grace Under Pressure came out, I think I had already bought, I had Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures, Signals, and 2112, and Fly By Night. So, you know, those are all pretty straight ahead rock, three-piece power bands.